Welcome to the Zeducation Podcast. So, talofa lava and aloha. Welcome back to the Zeducation Podcast, where we talk career, growth, leadership, and real development. Today's conversation matters because strong leadership is not just about results. It is about the environment that you create for people to perform, grow, and stay well. In high pressures workplaces, mental strength is a leadership skill, not a personal luxury. Our guest is Dr. Darius Wright, a licensed psychologist and private practice owner based in Hawaii. With lived experience across Samoa, New Zealand, the Philippines, and the US, he brings a powerful multicultural perspective to identity, mental health, and performance. He is passionate about reducing stigma, making mental health easier to understand, and helping people cut through misinformation with guidance that is culturally grounded and evidence-based. So in this episode, we're keen to explore mental strength for high performers, identity, trauma, performance, and what leaders can do to build resilient teams without burning their people out. So Dr. Darius Wright, welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
Thank you. Good, man. Thank you for that introduction. I feel real
Yeah.
special with that. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're a special person. And so not many people know this, but we both went to James Cook High School, which is
That's
pretty
right.
cool. But I'm still here in New Zealand and you're there in Hawaii. That
Yeah.
that yeah. That's pretty cool, man. So look, first of all, tell us how you ended up in Hawaii.
Oh, man. It's a long story. It's about 13 years ago. I met a girl. She's from California. We dated long distance and we thought, you know what? I'm going to go over to the US. We're going to propose. She's going to say yes. I'm going to bring her back to New Zealand. Well, the story was I came to the US. I proposed. Fortunately, she said yes. And then the plan to come back to New Zealand didn't work out. So I ended up staying in the US. We lived in Utah for about 3 years, California for about 6 months, Wisconsin for about 5 years. And that's where I got my doctoral degree in psychology. And to complete the degree, you have to have some type of internship or residency as part of the program. That's like the final capstone to your education. And the process really is you interview with a bunch of sites around the country. You rank order the sites that you prefer, and then the sites rank their candidates in order too. So we all throw our preferences in a system, and it prints out really this outcome. This algorithm chooses for us where we matched. And I matched here in Hawaii with a small clinic that offers behavioral health services to rural areas across Hawaii, different islands that don't have the behavioral health services. They plant us in those areas so we can provide the mental health services there. So once I completed that, we figured, why not stay here? So I went on to work for a big company, Kaiser Permanente. It's big here in the US. I'm not quite sure how far they stretch back in New Zealand or other countries. Yeah, so I worked there. Took some time off to be with the family and spend time with the kids because that's really important for our family. And then we decided, you know what, in order to make this a reality long term, the private practice is the way to go.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And there's not many Pacifica that I know who do what you do, which which is pretty cool. And one of the things I love about podcasts and why I'm passionate about doing it, this is our 100th episode, by the way, and
Oh,
we've
heck
had
yeah.
all sorts of people on this podcast, athletes, All Blacks, politicians, um, but like having experts like you who have a lot of this research and knowledge. I love podcasts because we provide a platform, a Talanoa style, to make information more accessible and digestible for our people. You know, a lot of these people do all these awesome research, have all this experience, but how do you articulate it in a way that's practical? How people can just take it away straight away and use it to improve their lives. This is what this podcast is all about. So I'm keen to kind of like pick your brain and your experience. So I guess before we get into the meat of our conversation today around getting some advice and around how to level up mentally, building resilience, What inspired you to become a psychologist? And the reason why I'm asking this is because there's a lot of people who are probably trying to figure out what they want to do in life, what their career, right? How early did you figure this out? What influenced you to get into this space?
Man, I was really late to the game, if I could be honest. I didn't even know psychology was a thing. Like you grew up in South Auckland, you see mental health, you don't know it's mental health issues, right? You don't have a label for it, you don't have a name for it. We live it and we see it, but I didn't even know it existed. And so my wife did her undergraduate in psychology, and it wasn't until I lived in the Philippines. So I graduated with an undergraduate in business, marketing and advertising. Went to the Philippines, did humanitarian services there for my church, if I can add that. And it got to the point where I realized my business degree just wasn't working. Like I want to help people, but the business degree and the skills that I developed just wasn't helpful. And I kept asking the questions like, why do people do what they do, right? Like we have these conversations, and then all of a sudden they're like, we don't want your services, or we don't want your help. And I'm just like, what's going on, man? Like, I'm trying to understand. So I think that question was the spark for me. It was understanding why people do what people do. And it wasn't until after I got married, the wife and I sat down, and I told her, I don't want to do business anymore. Like, business sucks. It's boring. At least at the time, right? And it's like, this is what I want to do. And she goes, that sounds like psychology. And I was like, what the heck is psychology? I don't remember when I went to AUT that psychology was even an option. Maybe it is, maybe it was, but had no idea what it was. In fact, I thought business management was stupid at the time too, because it's like, why do you need a degree to tell people what to do, right? Here I am, fast forwarding a few years. After looking into psychology a little bit more, I've realized this is it. Like, this is what I've been looking for. I took some prerequisite classes, and then just to like make sure that I cover the basics for an undergraduate degree. It wasn't equivalent to an undergrad by any means, but it helped me get the basics and understanding. And I just couldn't put the textbooks down. I wanted to keep reading it, keep understanding it. And then fast forward a few more years, we decided I'm going to go for my doctorate degree. Because in psychology, with an undergraduate, you can't do much. With a master's degree, it seems like very limited. Like this is where you end up, and this is like your experience, but you're not a generalist. But with a psychologist, the training is a lot more comprehensive. It's across the board. You're able to better understand like all these variables that influences human behavior. So I did the work. I applied to these programs, and fortunately for me, I got rejected once. Applied 1 year just to see what it was like. I got the interview, never got the position. So I was like, oh no, that sucks. Yeah, hit to the ego type of thing. And then I applied again the following year, got two interviews, and I got accepted to my program in Wisconsin. So when I got in, man, everyone in the program had years already ahead of me, right? Like they knew what psychology was. They did the undergraduate in psychology. They did their master's degree in psychology. And I'm just coming up super green and fresh, not knowing what the heck I was doing over there most of the time. But I adjusted. I adjusted pretty quick. And then fortunately for me, I've been able to like slowly catch up over the years to the point where, here I am, right?
That's awesome. That's awesome. So it was having that conversation with your wife and being open at the time as well. And this is what I tell people, especially young people, like how do you know what your passion is, right? It's like finding your favorite ice cream flavor. Try all the different flavors, then you will know what your
Yeah,
favorite ice cream flavor is.
yeah,
And sometimes that's what life is. It's like trying different things until you find that sweet spot, something that just lands and resonates well with you, eh? So
yeah,
I think that's a really nice message for people out there. It's like you don't have to, it's not a race to try and figure it out. Like it's a journey. Hey, and then it sounds like it's been a journey. You know what's quite common, you and I have in common is that I also got rejected at a university, but this was for a master's degree I was trying to apply for. And I applied at AUT, and then they go, Pussy, your transcript is not at that level yet in terms of literacy and numeracy, you can enroll into a postgrad diploma.
Yeah.
If you keep your grades up, then we'll give you extra papers, and then you
Oh
can
man.
exit with a master's degree. Anyway, I took it, but I just love that drive, ambition. It just reminiscing back on
Yeah.
those days. But I love it, man, brother. Okay, cool. So look, tell us about culture, identity, and mental health. Because
Mm.
especially for our Pacifica people, and I believe this is something that you're quite big on as well, especially for our people, is their cultural identity. And I'll be real with you. I don't know if you've been following New Zealand for a while, but there's a lot of it's pretty tough here. It's pretty
Mm.
tough here at the moment for a lot of our people. There's a lot of conflict between who am I and where I'm from. Being here in New Zealand, it's so diverse, but at the same time, it's beautiful, but it's also hard. People trying to figure out who they are, especially for Pacifica who are born in New Zealand and not in the islands. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of that. Like who am I? And I hear this a lot. I'm a plastic islander or a plastic Samoan. Like you hear those phrases thrown around. So tell us a little bit about that. Why is cultural identity important? How do people arrive there? How do they discover that? And why is that important for their mental health?
100%, man. That's a freaking awesome question. The importance, I think, for a lot of our listeners, I'm guessing, is it's a sense of belonging, right? Like as Pacifica, we come from tribes. Like these are your people. This is where you belong. Your belief systems, your value systems, all derive from this particular group. And it's those systems that helps you navigate your world and your worldly experiences. Without those systems and those belief systems, you don't know how to navigate life, basically, right? So to belong to a group, you want to be able to have those same belief systems, to share those values with other people. And if you don't feel like you belong, then you're wandering around looking aimlessly for like other groups that will accept you. The problem is you're not fully accepted in other groups, right? You got people that are Afakasi, for example, who like, I'm not completely Palangi, but I'm not completely Islander either. So where do I fit in that? I have different eating habits from my Palangi friends, and then you go to the Palangi side, like I don't fit the same clothes size as my Palangi friends. So it's a really interesting thing because I think people are always looking for a place to belong, and I think that's the core component of identity, right? The main question that any identity research does or tries to answer is who am I? But we answer that question in the context of who am I in the context of other people? Do I
Mm.
share those same values and same beliefs? So I think that's important. And if that piece is missing, that sense of belongingness, then we're left to ourselves. But if we don't have any additional inputs from other social contexts and other people around us, we don't have anything to process necessarily, and we find ourselves lost along the way.
Mm. Do you believe that's the foundation of having, I guess, good mental health is understanding who you are?
I think so, man. Like, I think it provides a really good foundation and anchor from where you can kind of explore the rest of your surroundings, right? If you don't know who you are, you're going to latch on to like what someone else says. And that leads to like things like people pleasing, leads to depression, leads to a sense of loneliness, leads to anxiety to like perform a certain way just to please other people. Without that foundation, you're just like this leaf that's drifting in this vast ocean of uncertainty because you don't know where exactly you're going to land. And you
Mm.
end up like, trying to blend in with your background, but after a certain point, you start to resent that background because deep down inside, you know it's not right. It's like, I don't belong here, right? I'm trying to do it just so I could get a certain reaction from people, but I know deep down like this doesn't feel right for me. And I think that's where a lot of the identity crisis happens. The
Mm.
I think one of my mentors, Johnson McKay, who was extraordinary entrepreneur, years back, the best advice he gave me was like, just be real with yourself. And this is when I was sort of trying to figure out like, do I want to stay in business? Do I want to stay something else? I knew in my heart business was not the right thing at the time for me. I just didn't know what the alternative was, right? And he kept saying like you're trying to fit like a round peg in a square hole type of analogy. And at times I was like, no, 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 no. This is what I have to do. But that's because people told me this is what I had to do. When you grow up in like South Auckland, where we where we grew up, and especially if you have a family straight from the islands, the only thing they have is like, oh, you got to be a lawyer, you got to be a business owner, you got to be a doctor. That's like the three main options you got, and like we have no chance of succeeding in any of those areas because we don't have the resources or the role models. But that's the belief system that you end up inheriting, and that's the belief system that guides your navigation. But it's not based on your own belief, right? That's not yours necessarily. It's someone else's, and that's the problem with identity. It's not yours. It's someone else's. So who you are, it's not really who you are. It's who other people want you to be.
I like that. And I like that you mentioned, yes, we both grew up in South Auckland. I grew up with something similar too. If it wasn't sports, it was being an architect or lawyer or something like that.
There you
And
go.
I did not fit any of those three. Um, if you see what I'm doing now. So like can you talk to our people out there who might be growing up and they have this pressure, like you gotta be this, you've got to be that, and that's all they know. They don't, and they might not even have any role models, right? How do they
Yeah.
start building a vision for themselves?
Yeah. I mean, you've probably heard the term, right? Fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Unfortunately for our people, we it's almost like we're groomed to have a fixed mindset because the previous generation only had limited perspective about what options are available. So with their limited perspective, they teach us, but they limit the options that they provide us. So as I was saying, right, my parents coming straight from Samoa, they're like, this is the three things we need to succeed in this country. And like, okay, I don't know what any of those things mean. And so when I was going to university, I was just like, okay, well, which one of these options is like best tries to meet the expectations put on me, but also somewhat interesting for me to do still. So in terms of like having options and trying to navigate that, I think it's important that we allow ourselves to branch out. Now, in saying that, it's not easy, right? Because if South Auckland's where you grew up, South Auckland's where you're born, and South Auckland's all you know, that's your world. So fortunately for me, through uni, I had friends that kind of introduced me to like, oh wait, there's more to New Zealand than just South Auckland. In fact, there's more to Auckland than just Clendon, where I grew up. So it's like you said, it's like giving yourself an opportunity to just like go out of your comfort zone, to have a taste of what else is available. If you don't like it, that's great. At least you know you don't like it. But you're giving yourself a chance to expand your horizon and expand options that you give yourself because you're not going to get given those, right? We just don't have the role models in certain places to help us succeed and thrive in some of these other spaces. So we really have to pioneer ourselves there.
I love that. Really great advice. Um, I also want to talk about like something to strive for. So still carrying on with that thread there around vision, thread, future. Um, how does I guess what does mental strength look like so that people can strive for that? Like I know there's no such thing as perfect mental health. I know there's no such thing as perfection. But
Mm.
what does strong mental health look like? Like from the outside, and I guess from a psychologist's perspective.
I mean, that's a great question too, and I think it has a lot of different layers. But if I was to simplify it, it is to have a resilient mindset. No matter how hard people try to overcome obstacles, to avoid obstacles and adversities, it's going to happen in your life because not everything is in your control, right? But your ability to bounce back, that is different. That's within your control. So if you're not equipped with the right abilities or the skill set or the mindset to come back, you're going to find yourself get stuck and life's going to take control of you. Right? There are there's this concept called internal locus of control and external locus of control. For an individual that has external locus of control, a lot of it is outward looking, relying on your environment to dictate what path you take, where you go, how to think. And when crap hits the fan, you blame the environment. Like, oh, like this thing happened, it wasn't my fault. So you blame the environment, everything else, and everyone else except yourself. And I think that limits a person's ability to be resilient. With internal locus of control, you're looking at yourself, right? Like, okay, this thing happened, this outcome happened. This was my contribution to this outcome. And this, if I was to do this again, I would change these things. And so it's really looking inside of you and looking at what are your spaces of influence that you can actually change so that you don't blame circumstances that's really out of your control, right? You only have yourself to change. And I think if you could master that, you can master resilience. But in saying that as well, resilience, in all research of resilience, the one consistent factor that's always there, no matter what type of resilience, a website you find or AI stuff, the one consistent factor is social support. You can't do it
Mm.
alone. You really can't. I mean, you can only go so far, and then once you hit a plateau, and then you need someone to like back you up in your corner. That's that's the advantage that we Pacific Islanders have, is we always have someone, right? The advice might be crap. They might not give proper advice, but they've got your back. And that's what our culture has an advantage of that maybe other people from individualistic cultures don't.
That's it doesn't sound like rocket science, but it sounds very profound.
Yeah.
It sounds very,
Yeah.
it sounds impactful. Because there are people who have that mindset, like, I don't care what people think, I don't need anybody, like, this is my life, I can do what I want, right? Like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But you're right. And like, just as you were saying that, I was reflecting on my own life. I'm like, actually, I didn't get here this on my own. Like,
Yeah.
I can reflect on times where I've hit rock bottom. My wife was always there,
Yep.
or I'm talking to my mum on the phone. Even now, like there's always somebody there, right? And you forget that when things are going well. So I think that's a really great message for our audience. Is even if nothing's wrong, it's just having that social support is so important, eh? Like,
Yeah.
well, what's your advice around how do people cultivate that? Because I feel like, yeah, you're right. For especially for Mori and Pacifica, that's a superpower that we shouldn't underutilize, right? Or
Mm.
take for granted. Like, how do we leverage that? Like, what does it look like? How do I
Yeah.
go about doing that?
Yeah. I appreciate the comment about it's not rocket science. It really isn't, right? I think one of the ways that we can leverage it is just to be authentic. We have an innate ability to pick up on fake, especially when in social interaction. As you talk to someone and someone's like upping themselves, like, oh yeah, I went to this thing, I did that thing, and straight away the hairs on your skin start standing up, and your spider senses are like, this person is like full of it, right? Or like they're relishing all of this information. So we have this sense to pick up bullcrap, basically. And I think in order to cultivate that support system, you just got to be authentic. As I said before, if you're not authentic, you're not real to who you are truly. If you're not real to who you are truly, you're going to be painted in a way that your environment dictates, right? And then you're going to go with that, and you're going to go with it really resentful, not liking the outcomes, and still blaming your environment. You're not taking any ownership or accountability for yourself. So being authentic to yourself is going to burn bridges. That's the reality, because not everyone's going to like you, but at least you're true to you. And those that you attract are true to themselves, and you're going to be a magnet to those individuals that really build you and support you. Those are the people you want to attract anyway, right? If someone doesn't like you because of who you are, that's probably not who you want in your circles anyway, to begin with.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Um, Man, I hope our audience really takes notes about this. This is so important, eh? Just that social support, being in that environment where you can thrive and people believe in you, they see your potential,
Mm.
and they back you. They have your back when things are going chaos and bad, right? So, is there anything else that people can do to be more resilient? So you said one of the most powerful things and common things that's mentioned out there is that social support. What else is there that people can do to build this resilience and to be able to bounce back from setbacks?
Mm. Well, we covered quite a few of them, right? We covered identity, like knowing who you are, being real with yourself. That's always important. In addition to the social support on that piece, I think understanding your limitations.
Mm.
I think part of the problem, part of the challenges that we experience is like when we don't know ourselves that well, meaning if we don't know where our limitations lie, we're going to put ourselves in the situations where we're setting ourselves up to fail. And a lot of the time we refuse to accept it, right? And that's sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. But if you refuse to accept where you're limited, you're never going to be at a point where you can make the change happen possible. Because if you're in denial about your limitations, you're going to put yourself in a corner that you can't, or in a hole, let's say, that you can't come out of, right? Because you're not being smart about what you can do, you're not being smart about what's available to you and where you need to go. So I think that's another important piece for people to consider. But I mean, again, not rocket science, but we don't take the time to really reflect on who we are and what we do. We live
Mm.
life, right? And this is the beauty of therapy is that you have someone to ask you questions so that it stimulates a different type of thinking for you. Because if you're left to just think about yourself, to yourself, the only thing that's going out of the chambers of your brain are your own thoughts, right? There's no new stimulus, there's no new information input for you to process. That's what limits it, right? And that's the beauty of therapy is you have someone that understands human behavior, that knows, okay, these are the patterns that you're exhibiting. Now let me ask you some questions for you to ponder and reflect on so that it gives you something else, a different perspective to consider. That I think that piece is really important. Yeah, so that therapy is great for that. And there's differences between like a psychologist versus a therapist, and I think that's always been a question that people have, right? Like, what is the difference, type of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, go back. That was the answer to your question. Sorry, another factor to build resilience, just like knowing your limitations, understanding who you are, and what you can actually contribute.
Yeah, and being real to that, I know a lot of people who are afraid to be open and true about what their limitations are because they worry about, people might see me as being weak.
Oh, 100%.
They worry about what other people think, and they try and hide and mask it and sweep it under the carpet, right? And only show the good stuff. Whereas we're coming back to what you said, just being true to who you are, right? If
Yeah.
people don't like it, if people judge it, who cares, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you care to some sort of degree. It's your life. But what is the difference between, before we move on, what is the difference between a therapist and a psychologist?
So a therapist is someone with a master's degree, right? And there's different types of therapists, so to speak.
Mm.
So, for example, there's different licenses and different credentials that someone has. But so long as you have a master's degree, you're considered a therapist, at least in the US. I'm not quite sure about New Zealand. So, for example, in the US, there's like licensed professional counselor, there's a licensed clinical social worker, there is a licensed marriage and family therapist. All of those have master's degree that have, I suppose, different specialization, but they all have a very particular focus. And the training is not as rigorous, right? Like the 2 year program, your practicum experience is limited to 1 semester, and then wherever you end up for employment is typically what is going to influence your skill set, your expertise,
Ah.
right? So if you end up working at like a trauma center that focuses on trauma, your expertise is likely going to grow up in that environment, like you're a trauma specialist type of thing. If you're fortunate enough to like have different experiences, like now you're a substance abuse counselor or you've gone somewhere else, then those work experiences are going to help you build your specialties. As a psychologist, you need a doctorate degree. So that's the difference, right? And so with a doctorate degree, it's either a PhD, which is doctorate in philosophy, specializing in psychology, or you have a PsyD, which is a doctorate of psychology. Now, the differences between those is like a PhD uses the scientific practitioner model, which is you use research to support your clinical practice. Whereas a PsyD is a practitioner scientific model where the clinical practice comes first, and then the research comes later on. Like you don't put a whole lot of focus and emphasis on the research part. So that's the difference, but they're both doctoral. And in the training phase of it, you're expected to, we call them practicum sites. You're expected to, like, while you're doing your degree, while you're probably teaching, at least from my experience, I was teaching, I was doing, what you call it, I was doing my coursework, I was doing research, and then on top of that, I had to do like 20 hours of practicum, which is like I go to different sites and see clients there. And then one year that's one site, then another year, then another year, then another year, different, all different sites. So usually with a PhD, it's about 5 to 6 years as opposed to 2 years in a master's degree. So
Wow.
that'd be the difference, right? So the training is different, the rigors is different, the areas of specialty, masters tend to specialize more, whereas psychologists tend to be generalists, having an array of experiences in different settings.
That's quite interesting. So, from what I understand, therapist, there's a huge umbrella. It's a breadth, right, of expertise there, or flexibility. Whereas psychology, or being psychologist, is a little bit more in depth. It's more deep and detailed. Um, that level of expertise and insight. That's pretty cool. I want to go back to what you said before around like how you talked about this locus of control, external and internal,
Mm,
and you talked about like in terms of bouncing back, it's that ability to also self-reflect and reassess the situation, the issue, yourself, and then strategizing, figuring out some sort of strategy or a way forward, eh? And it sounds like with some people who might find it hard to do that on their own, might need some support from
mm.
someone like yourself, who can help them kind of walk through, reflect, and figure out strategies moving forward. But I think that's what I'm hearing or what I'm getting in terms of bouncing back is, in order to get better at that, you need to develop the skills of self-reflection, and strategizing and then improving and acting on it, eh?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
100%. Yeah, the ability to laugh at yourself, I think, as simple as that sounds, I think that matters a great deal, right? Because a lot of the time, when we look at performance anxiety, so performance anxiety is typically associated with like sports and athletes' performance, but performance anxiety could be in a number of different roles. The reason why people have so much anxiety around the ability to perform is because they've internalized a lot of these issues themselves. And then they project those issues onto other people, thinking, "Oh, I'm being judged based on this thing. People might be thinking I suck at this thing, or I'm terrible at this other thing." It's not like people are doing those judgments, but we think those people are doing those judgments because we're projecting our own insecurities onto them,
Uh-huh.
right? So if you can laugh at yourself because you failed or you made a mistake and you can just like shrug it off, that there is resilience. Because then it doesn't matter what anyone else says, whether they criticize you or
Right.
make fun of you, it doesn't matter because you don't believe it, right? Like you've already laughed at yourself for it. So it's like, whatever's.
Man, I love that. I love that. I don't think I think it's hard. Like you said, it's not rocket science, but I think a lot of people might find it hard to laugh at themselves.
Yeah.
And I like that because I'm always that my mindset is life is short. Like, enjoy life. Don't take everything too serious. You're not perfect. You're gonna make mistakes. Just accept it. And have fun, but keep improving. Keep improving. I love that.
100%.
Can you talk to our leaders around the importance of looking after their mental health or their well-being? If
Mm.
they don't do it, what's the risk?
Oh my gosh. What's the risk? I mean, everything, basically, right? And I'm not just talking from a professional standpoint, I'm talking about on a personal level too.
Mm,
If leaders, and leaders, I mean, by definition, right, leaders are the ones that set the vision. Leaders are the ones that understand, like, what are the factors and the mechanics that go into, like, successful, to having a business be successful. if you're not able to perform as a leader because of mental block or mental health conditions, you no longer have a vision of what's going to be productive for your company or organization. If you don't have the vision, then you don't have an understanding of the mechanics that's working to get you there, right? You basically just shut down all your systems and then you're on survival mode. So that influences a leader's ability to lead. And then how does that affect the rest of the company? Well, one, you're setting a really bad example for everyone else. Everyone looks to you as the leader. Like what you do, they follow. And if you as the leader are not prioritizing your own health, what message does that give your organization? It's not important, right? Our leader is crashing and burning. That's what we need to do. Let's crash and burn with him or her, right? So you're really setting a bad precedence for the rest of your company to follow. You're setting a bad example for your subordinates and your colleagues to follow. And then ultimately you create this very toxic environment where no one wants to speak up. So if I'm a subordinate or if I'm an employee and I see my leaders crash and burn, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. But I'm in a meeting with them, and what do I say? Nothing. Why? Because the leaders have created this environment where I can't speak up, where the only logical choice is to crash and burn with everyone else, because that's what we do here in this company. That's what the culture is. That's on a professional level, right? Personal level, if you can't perform at work, surely you can't perform at home too. You're absent from your spouse, you're absent
Mm.
from your kids, you're there physically maybe, but psychologically you're just away. Your ability to manage stress diminishes, so you lash out more quickly, you're more irritable, have more anger outbursts, you have poor sleep, and of course, with sleep, that throws everything out the window, right? You just cannot regulate and cannot function optimally in any setting or any context that you find yourself in if you don't prioritize your mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. What you do, what you don't do, like you said, gives people permission to do the
Mm.
same. And like you're saying, like the risk is it's not just self-sabotage, but you risk harming the people that you care about or
Oh,
people that are within your
100%.
stewardship, right? That's the importance of it. And like, so Darius, like, look, you probably do it yourself. You know, you probably work out. You look like you're a fit guy. I go myself to the gym.
Yeah,
And I try to do it consistently because I feel like it just gives me energy. It helps me to stay fit. Because if I'm lazy or tired and I don't have the energy, I can't give. I can't serve
yeah,
to my capacity, full
yeah.
capacity, right? Um, what would be an equivalent gym for people's mental well-being? Like, what's some things because we discuss things that people could do to bounce back when things go wrong, or just kind of manage. But what can people do practically on a day-to-day, small things that they could do, one or two things?
Mm. I mean, the gym thing is really awesome, right? It really kind of depends on what your condition is. But if we're talking about like depression, for example, movement is going to be the kryptonite to depression. So if you go for a walk, if you go to the gym, if you go on a hike, if you go like hang out with friends, go surf or whatever it is, right? That's going to be the best remedy for depression. Because, and it's usually like the research will show like it's usually like 20 to 30 minutes of moderate to intense cardio workouts, aerobics exercises. And you can do that like 3 days a week type of thing. And that's sufficient to deal with the depression. So it's movement, man, like getting up, doing stuff, getting stuff you enjoy as much as you can. That's really, I think, if people are just active, that solves like about a third to a half of all the mental health conditions, right? It is crazy how being active really does help with mental health, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's trauma. Like it helps a great deal just to be active.
Yeah. So then it is true what Tony Robbins said. Tony Robbins says your physiology can change your psychology.
Oh my gosh, 100%. And vice versa, right?
Mm,
If you look at depression, for example, a lot of the time when we're tired, we take a break, you get some sleep, and then after that, you feel good. But when you're depressed, it will say, hey, take a nap. You go take a nap. You don't feel rested. So what does depression tell you again? Oh, stay in bed a little bit longer. Okay,
Mm.
stay in bed. And then before you know it, you've become this inactive person, right? So inactive, and because you're inactive, you're no longer engaging in things you enjoy, so the reinforcement decreases. And all of a sudden, everything just seems miserable. Everything seems overwhelming. Nothing's enjoyable. And then you just left with these negative thoughts that just tell you like, hey, life just sucks. So activity really is a huge remedy.
Yeah. You mentioned depression, and I know this for a lot of people, this can be a very tough topic. This could be a whole different podcast episode on its own, right? How do you manage that and move forward from that? But um, just since we're on this topic, what can you say around or advice that you can give to people who might be dealing with past trauma? They're carrying something from the past
Mm.
that they can't, it's holding them back from building more resilience or being mentally strong. Like what can you say around that?
Yeah, and that's really interesting, right? Because trauma could look like a lot of things. It could look like depression, and it's not. It could look like anxiety, but it's not. It looks like ADHD, but it's not. Like trauma really does look like a lot of other conditions people have. One thing that I would encourage people to be mindful of is, and even like their support system, if you've noticed a change in your regular patterns, meaning if you're usually an outgoing person and you're no longer outgoing, right? Or if you usually have good sleep, but then your sleep is like shot, like you can't fall asleep, you can't maintain sleep, you can't initiate sleep, that type of thing. That's a good sign. If your appetite is no longer around, like if you eat more than you usually do, or you eat less than you usually do, that's another indicator of potential trauma. If you have mood dysregulation, meaning you're just like irritable and you have no idea why,
Mm.
like these are all signs that potential trauma and unresolved issues at the underlying of what you're experiencing. So to build resilience, it's going to be really hard. And that's where I think your support system is going to matter the most, right? Because if you're in a trauma and the symptoms are very active, you no longer have the capacity to operate optimally. That's when you need someone to get you out of the gutter, get you out of the hole, and get you to some professional help. Now, in saying that, there's people that are still functioning, high functioning, executives even, like with a lot of trauma, a lot of unresolved issues, but they pushed through that. But to what cost, right?
Mm.
It might look like successful people on the outside, but internally just suffering. And that's where your support system matters.
Yeah. With their support system, I mean, obviously it could be anyone. Is there a, I guess, a boundary around like a support system? Like, I'm just mindful of like we don't want people like using their children who are young
Hmm,
and offloading stuff to them, right? They're young kids, right? Like, I guess like
100%.
what's some guidelines around a support system?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point you made, right? It's not inappropriate to reach out for kids and use them to kind of process and escape what you're going through. Unfortunately, that happens though. So guidelines around support system, a friend, obviously, a spouse or a partner, those are good support systems. Church leaders usually is pretty good, especially for Pacific Islanders who, generally are religious. There's other social groups that you can reach out to, like here, at least in the US, is like biker groups that people go and ride motorcycles around. There's like paddle clubs. I mean, back home there's like rugby clubs, right? And there's other sports clubs as well that you can join. So those things I think help. But the challenge though is like if no one's asking for help, then you as the
Mm.
support system, you have to be mindful of like what is my role now, right? Like do I overstep this person's autonomy and just like get them help, or do I not, right? Because if they're not reaching out for help, then sometimes we're like, what the heck do we do? And things like that. I think it's always worth it to have the conversation, because if you don't have the conversation, the people that's suffering will never know the support exists, right? As uncomfortable as the conversation may be, and like you might not get the results or the outcome you want in that moment, the person who's suffering is going to think back like, oh, yeah, so and so, Bussy reached out to me. He was comfortable enough to have this conversation with me, even though like I chased him off or I was like a complete idiot to him. At least he was willing to go there with me. And that's when they're ready to change, they'll come and find you. Right? So that'll be some recommendations. It's like don't be afraid to have the conversation. And don't
Mm.
think that don't put yourself down if you don't accomplish the outcome you want. Like if they're not going to seek for help, don't worry about it. You've planted a seed. The time will come when they're ready.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I want to move into like because this is one of the things I saw on your social media around misinformation.
Hmm.
Um, there might be people, especially now that we're in the digital age of AI, and people are now using it as a source of truth. Getting advice. There's a vice and a virtue to it because I've seen in the media some really bad stories, like children who have just it's led to things like them taking their life,
Yeah.
doing some crazy things, because the misuse and the misinformation they receive from using these things like AI, right? Um, Look, what can people do? What's your advice around that? How do you navigate this space, and how do you know what's credible and useful and something that's not true and not good for you?
Yeah. And I think that's becoming more and more difficult to distinguish, right? Like what is true versus what's made up. I think a lot of the time, what helps is like, don't rely on one source. And unfortunately, that's what people do, right? Like, again, speaking for the US, because that's generally what I know here, there's Fox News, for example, which is like generally a conservative news outlet. Then there's CNN, which is like a very liberal news outlet. When you get people that just watch Fox News or just watch CNN, they only have one perspective, right? And then when they have a conversation, it's like, wait, what have you been watching? Like completely opposite. And I'm guessing you back home is similar to that as well. So if you limit yourself to one source of information, you're going to limit your perspective. You're not, and chances are it's not entirely accurate either. That's not the whole truth. So my encouragement is like explore different avenues and different options. Look at this. Ask yourself questions like be critical about the information you're consuming, right? If we don't ask the questions, you're just going to be like a blind follower, just like going along with whatever it is information that you're being fed. So that would be my advice is like look at multiple sources, think critically about the sources and critique it, ask yourself questions,
Nice.
and then go out and looking for the answers. Because bro, the problem with so much of these protests and stuff is like
Yeah.
people are echoing the message that their neighbors echoing. And then
Yeah.
when you drill them, like when you like ask them questions, they really sit down and like, hey, why did you do this? Bro, they're like scratching their head and thinking, yeah,
Yeah.
why did I do this? Like because my neighbor told me. It's just yeah. So you don't want to be a blind follower of information. Like you really have to think critically about it, look at different sources, and then cross-references what you've learned, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's a great example of being influenced. Eh? It's just
Yeah.
because that's just a friend or someone that you know, and
Oh,
because they said
100%.
it, they recommended it, they mentioned it, and therefore you adopt it, right?
Yeah.
You just trust them because they're your. But
Yeah.
as we're heading towards the end of our podcast, and this has been really insightful, and I'm really grateful. Our audience, our people, are going to take a lot of value from this. Um, just coming back to that influence, right? You've given I guess an example of something negative. People just adopt a negative mindset because they're so and so friends or neighbors. What about talking to like people like with children, parents, or even leaders with teams, right? It's the same thing in
Mm.
terms of influence. You've got people within your stewardship. We've talked a lot about leaders or what people can do for themselves. What about what can leaders do for others to create an environment where the environment cultivates and nurtures resilient and growth mindset within the team,
Mm,
within the family. Right?
mm.
Like for me, like I want to do that for my team. I want to do that for my children. So what's some tips that you can give me so that I can be able to go home and do this with my kids or with my team at work?
100%, man. I mean, so that also varies, right? Within the family, the way that you're going to interact with young kids, that say like in primary, is going to look very different from how you interact with intermediate age and high school age
Yeah.
and even like
Right.
university age. It's going to look very different. One thing that and you probably experienced this growing up in South Auckland, right, in a Polynesian home, is we get told what to do without any explanation whatsoever. And if we don't execute, bro, we get the hiding, right? We get a hiding. And I'm sitting there, wondering sometimes, like, and we're all being there, like, what the hell did I just do? Like, what did I do wrong? There's no explanation,
Mm.
right? We just get the consequences. And
Right.
I think there is a shift in our generation now in the way we parent. I think we're a lot more communicative, which is extremely important, as to helping our kids understand why things happen, not just what
Mm.
is happening, right? And then depending on the age, as they hit intermediate and high school, autonomy becomes a really important thing for those kids. So it's the way the parent, like just telling them what to do, might have worked in primary age, but no longer works with the teenagers. So one way that parents can approach that is like respect your kids' autonomy. Still have boundaries, still have limitations, but if they want to do something, you allow them the opportunity to make those decisions. But you also have to, it's almost like an executive meeting. It's like, this is what you're going to do. Tell me how it's going to do. Break it down for me. Like,
Right.
how are you going to accomplish this, right? Um,
Strategy.
Strategize it 100%. And if it doesn't work, what do we do? What's the contingency plan? So all of those things I think matter, but the communication really is the underlying thing there, is having a conversation with them. With work, I think what really matters is like you have to set the tone for what you want others to follow. We've touched on this before, right? If people don't respect their mental health, people are going to replicate that. But if you value mental health, then you show it. And vulnerability as a business leader is probably one of the most difficult things to do, because as a leader, you think and you believe that you're supposed to be the rock and
Mm.
everyone else comes to
Yeah.
you, right? The weight of the company or the weight of the organization is on your shoulders. And then whatever crap happens in the company, you're the go-to person. Like everyone comes to you. So to be vulnerable is almost like, "Ah, now I got to show some weakness, right? I got to show this human side of me." It's okay. To be vulnerable means to express, it's expressing who you are. It's being real with who you are. But also allows your subordinates and your colleagues to understand like who is the real you that they're dealing with, right? And you set the tone. So if you're real with them, they're real with you, and the communication flows a lot more easily. There's no more like restricting. Should I not say this? Should I not do this? And then people start taking like ownership of things, right? Because they no longer like look to you for all the answers because you're the rock. They've realized, oh, there's limitations to my boss. So how do I support him in this vision that he or she's created? I'm just gonna take things on my own, have my own autonomy, do things out of my own volition, because I don't need to be micromanaged, right? And so it just creates this really free flow workspace, I would think, to help kind of boost productivity that way. So that would be my take on like the family home as well as the organization piece.
Beautiful. Amazing, amazing, powerful. Nice way to wrap up our podcast, our Talanoa today. Before we say goodbye, Dr. Wright, what's your final words of encouragement for our audience? And then after that, if people want to get in touch with your services, how can they contact you? How can they reach out?
Well, let me get start with the services first. Just my website is drdariuswright.com. The information is there. If you're in the States, if you're in Hawaii specifically and you need services, You can just Google my name, so Darius Wright, and then Psychologist, and all my profiles will pop up in different platforms. So that's one way to get a hold of me. The contact information is all on those platforms. In terms of final words, oh my gosh, I would say this, and this has been an ongoing conversation with my wife. You have to have, so there's this thing called outcomes oriented perspective, and then there's a process oriented mentality, right? If you adopt only an outcomes oriented mentality, you're only going to look at things black and white. And if you don't succeed, then you basically label yourself as a failure. I mean, it works in some instances, but not everything, right? But if you have only an outcomes-oriented perspective, you limit yourself to just black and white, to just succeeding and failing. And a lot of the times we don't succeed. So what do? We call ourselves failures. With a process-oriented perspective, it's looking at your journey as a continuum, not as a destination, right? And like for those who are just getting started, bro, it's okay. It's okay if you're late to the game because it's a continuum.
Right.
Like you're just here, other people might be ahead of you and other people are behind you. That's okay. If you haven't succeeded, I mean, if you keep making mistakes, it means not because you failed, because you haven't succeeded yet, right? It's a very different way of speaking to yourself. So my advice would be like, use both. Use outcomes-oriented perspective, set yourself some goals, but the way to drive yourself to those goals is through a process-oriented mentality. Like look at it as a process. Every failure is a step closer to success. And yeah, so and it's okay to be late, it's okay to be early. It's just you're just there. That's all that matters. You're finally starting this journey.
I love that. And I love what you just said there at the end. Every failure is a step towards success. Nice piece of advice and encouragement for our audience. And thank you again for your time, Dr. Wright, just blessing us with your experience, your insights, your expertise. Thank you for the work that you do and the service that you render for people out there. There's not many Pacifica in this space who do what you do. And so we're very proud of you. We're all cheering for you, and hope that you continue to do some amazing things and some great impact for our people. So much love from all of us here in New Zealand to you and your family.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the great work, my brother. But there you go, Dr. Wright. We'll also put links to his website in the description as well. But again, thank you for your time. Your advice will much better for it.
Man, appreciate you, brother. It's so good to see you. I'm happy for your success. I wish you continued success. You, your family, your community back home. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you allowing me the time.